What happens if you're the cause of the breakup? Then the natural inclination is, well, if I broke it, if I'm the one that caused this breakup, I need to pay the penalty. I need to cast my pride aside and I need to pursue. I need to plead. I need to prove to them my sorrow by repeatedly showing them that I want another chance and I've kind of earned my pain. So no contact shouldn't work for me if I cause the breakup, right? Well, part of the principles still apply, part of them don't. If you cause the breakup, some of the principles that apply in no contact are still important. They still matter. There's still principles that are involved in just reattraction in general. And one of the things that can really sabotage you if you cause the breakup is that you know you caused it, so that guilt compels you to chase and to plead and to fix and to mend. And if they keep rejecting you, you'll keep telling yourself, well, I earned it. They should keep rejecting me. I mean, maybe you were in a relationship for, I don't know, a year or 5 years or 10 years. And if you feel like throughout that time you didn't value them, then when they break up with you, you might look at it like, well, if I have to chase them for a year or 5 years or 10 years, I've earned it. That's what I'm supposed to do. Chase for as long as you took them for granted. Except it doesn't work that way. So one of the first things you'll need to do is understand, what do you mean? How do you define you caused the breakup? Because remember, after a breakup, especially a really painful one, your sense of reality and your sense of judgment is going to be a little bit off. So one of the first things you really want to identify is, what do you mean when you say I caused the breakup? We kind of put it in two different categories. There's the toxic and the more obvious, the more traditional version of I caused the breakup. That would include, I cheated on them. They caught me sleeping with their sister, or they caught me sleeping with their brother, or both. If you did something that just nobody would deny that, yeah, you were clearly the cause of that breakup, that's one area. But there's another area where people say, okay, I know it's not as obvious, but even though I didn't do anything toxic, I didn't cheat, I didn't lie, I didn't deceive, and I did my best to value them, I still caused the breakup. Well, what do you mean by that? And I'll just kind of give you a quick example. Maybe you're the person that was really investing in building a company. Maybe you're the person that was investing in building the future, and you were, in your mind, you're building the future for both of you. But while you're doing that, maybe your ex kept telling you, I need more time with you. I don't feel like you value me enough. I don't feel like I matter more to you than your business or the money or whatever goal you have. So in that situation, did you cause the breakup? Well, yeah, you might have. Did you do something toxic that the whole world would agree made you break the relationship? Well, that's not so clear. So when somebody says, yeah, I broke the relationship, I caused it, it's my fault, it really depends on identifying which one of those applies to you. Keep in mind, the person that you attract the most, that person that has the most chemistry and electricity, there's a very high likelihood that there's an opposite end of that personality or behavioral spectrum. It's very similar to Myers-Briggs and the DISC format. We were taught by a guy named Dr. Joe Beam how to identify certain behavioral patterns that people have. So there's one of them that we refer to as the conqueror mentality. The conqueror mentality is kind of a person that's kind of wired to live on the edge, competitive. A lot of times they're an entrepreneur, or they might be in police work or the military. They're just they thrive on competition. And for them to actually feel like they're fulfilled, for them to feel like they're living the life that they were meant to live, they need to be involved in something that has a bit of an edge, a bit of excitement. So a lot of times they'll go into business for themselves. That's kind of that entrepreneurial spirit, personality type. Well, that kind of personality thrives on succeeding. They thrive on excelling and being dominant in whatever field they're in. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a good chance that that person that they fall in love with might be more introverted, might not be that competitive, might not be that bold and risk-taking. The person they fall in love with might actually be more introverted, more carefully planning, more reserved, more into stability, and even more into personal, private, intimate time. So those two people, strangely enough, we're attracted to people that have opposite personality types of us, as long as we line up in terms of moral code, life goals, and a strong mutual attraction. Then we're actually going to be attracted to people that have opposite characteristics of us, because those opposite characteristics create attributes and talents and gifts that we don't have. For example, when I was younger, I did stand-up comedy for a little bit. Well, I've always had a pretty good sense of humor, but I'm not actually drawn to somebody. I've never wanted to date somebody who's a laugh a minute, who's constantly cracking jokes. I mean, I like a good sense of humor, but at the same time, if I'm dating somebody who's got a strong sense of humor, what does that do for me? That's not going to actually make me be highlighted. It's not going to make me look as impressive to somebody who also has a good sense of humor. Like, I'm drawn to somebody who's more thoughtful, more introverted, and just more kind of careful and well-planned and into structure and details. I admire qualities more that I don't have. It'd be the same thing. Let's say that somebody's succeeded in business and they're worth $5 million. Well, one of the common logical things we'll think is, hey, if that person's a success in business and worth $5 million, hey, I know somebody else that's a success in business and worth $5 million. They'd be great together. You just kind of think two people that are very similar are going to go great together. But if you're worth $5 million, are you as impressive to somebody who's also worth $5 million? If you're a professional, using the sense of humor thing, and I've never been a professional comic, but if somebody was a stand-up comedian, do you think they're just as impressive and just as hilarious to another stand-up comedian? If one person excels in planning and detailed, structured thinking, are they going to be as impressive to somebody else who excels in that same area? So you get the point. If you're watching this, I'd guarantee the majority of the people watching this with the X that they really have that overwhelming connection, chemistry, and electricity for, there are attributes that that other person has or had that you don't have. That's where chemistry, electricity, and that strong passion comes from in part. So part of what makes you believe that maybe you quote unquote broke the relationship might be based in that area. Because at the beginning of a relationship, when you're falling in love with each other, the differences amaze you. The differences create admiration and mesmerize. It'll make you feel mesmerized. Like, I can't believe how incredible they are in this area. They're so gifted to be able to do what they do. So you feel that respect, you feel that admiration, you feel that attraction. One of the things that will happen over time is we start to resent the differences that appear as weaknesses more than we admire the strengths that come from differences. And the more time you are together, the harder it is to appreciate the things that you used to be amazed by. It's similar to, have you ever bought a car that you just loved? Maybe when you were a teenager, or maybe now you just bought the car of your dreams. Well, when you first get that car for the first year, every time you get in it, you feel like you're Batman climbing into the Batmobile. But after a while, it stops being that dream car and it just becomes your car. After a while, even the great things, it works the same way with the house. I remember the first time I bought a house, I was just kind of amazed. I can't believe I got this house. This is me. I got this. This is mine. Well, I noticed it wasn't 6 months before it was just my house. Well, we do the same thing with people. The things that amazed us, the things that we think were incredible and create this admiration and attraction over time, especially over years, start to become more normal. And then what starts to emerge more and more are the differences that create resentment, that create problems, and that conflict with how we're wired at our base. So going back to that couple that I'm just using as an example, there are multiple examples of the principles I'm talking about right now. But one of the examples that still happens a lot is there might be a guy that's really investing in building a company. And he really loves the woman that he's with, but he's focused on building the company because he's trying to secure the future for both of them. And he thinks he's doing a really good thing. And he's disciplined and he's driven and he knows what he's going to accomplish. He knows how he's going to be a great provider, protector, and everything else. But while he's doing that and feeling pride that he's doing it, feeling fulfilled that he's doing it, maybe the woman he loves is feeling neglected. And she's saying, when are we going to make plans? Are you ever going to put a ring on my finger? Are we ever going to get married? Are you ever going to make time for me? You know, my sister's wedding is coming up, or I want to go on that dream vacation, and you never make time for me. Now, which one of them is wrong? Which one of them is breaking the relationship? Neither one of them. The way he's wired to have a sense of being fulfilled and for being who he is, he's kind of wired for that competitive nature, if he's that personality type. And I should say, I'm not trying to be sexist. These roles can be reversed. It's just an example of the principle. But whoever's driving that business, that doesn't necessarily make them wrong. They have pure intent, even admirable goals. But what they don't understand, because they don't teach relationship dynamics in school, is that the person that you're going to have the most chemistry and electricity and connection with, because of those different characteristics, over time, those differing characteristics are going to create conflict. So the thing to understand is to take a deep breath and realize there are certain key moments when you have to identify the core need of that person that you're with. And maybe you're watching this video now because you didn't understand that in the past, but to stick with this example. So maybe over time, that woman breaks up with that man because she just feels like she's always going to come in second place to his business or to his goals or to anything else. Well, it might catch him by surprise and it might devastate him. And now he's thinking, it really cost me her. I never thought she'd leave me. And I thought she understood what I was doing. As a matter of fact, I felt a little wounded because she wasn't encouraging me. She wasn't showing gratitude for what I was doing. She started complaining. She started nagging that I was working too hard. How can I be criticized for working too hard? So that resentment might have triggered even more of a pull away until one of them causes the breakup. It's more of a natural occurrence that happens through misunderstanding. And when we get in those situations, when one person starts pulling away what we need, we start pulling away what they need, hoping that that's going to be a signal to them that they need to change their behavior. And what it can do a lot of times is just create that avalanche and make it bigger and make it more destructive. Because they don't teach that, look, the way to have that principle work with a couple would be for her to understand, look, the way that guy's wired, part of what attracted her to him in the first place is that drive, is that competitive nature. So what he's doing now, it might seem like it's at the cost, at the sacrifice of time with her. But if she can take a deep breath and actually show admiration for him and encouragement, gratitude for what he's doing, a lot of times that person will take a deep breath and say, oh, it feels good to be noticed. It feels good to be identified and to be admired, because that personality style really thrives on admiration and respect. So a lot of times they'll stop and adjust, or they should. If they don't, then you have a real problem. At the same time, the person that's driving that business, the one that's trying to build for the future, if they can stop and realize that the person that they're with might not be wired the same way, neither one of them has to change who they are at their core. You don't want to have to change who you are at your core to be with somebody that you love. But if you can recognize key moments and make adjustments to let the other person know that no matter how you're wired, that person means more to you than that overwhelming goal, if that makes sense. So let's say in this situation, the way those two people would actually work it out is the person building the business would take a deep breath and say, look, this is what I'm driving towards. This is my target. This is what I want to accomplish. But at certain key moments, I have to be able to stop. I'll work it into my schedule. Hey, look, I know you want time with me, and I love you too. I want time with you. So every Friday from after 6 o'clock, I'm yours. Every weekend, every other weekend, you have to make adjustments. Part of you being a success is building in and making adjustments to allow for that other person's core needs. Because the person that you might be drawn to, if you are that conqueror mentality, might be what we kind of call the defender mentality. The defender mentality is somebody who really values relationships and time with people. They're really very close to their family, closer to family than the normal person. They're very sacrificial. They're not very extroverted. They can be, but for the majority of the time, they think about things internally. They monitor and they feel and they analyze and they reanalyze, but they might not tell you everything that they're thinking. And in the situation I'm describing, a lot of times that person ends up breaking up with that person building the business, and that person building the business never saw it coming, because that defender mentality tends to think about things under the surface until they come to a conclusion. And when they come to the conclusion that they're going to break up with you, it's almost like they're giving you the conclusion to a conversation that you were never part of. And if you try to reclaim the relationship, then it's too late. They'll say, it took too long. I tried to tell you for too many years. I tried to tell you for too many months. You didn't listen to me. And I knew you were going to be willing to change before I broke up with you. But you were only willing to change because I'm breaking up with you. If you really were meant to be with me telling you how I felt would have been enough. So that's just one example. I'm sorry if I got too specific with just that one example of that one principle, but I'm trying to think of the one that might highlight these principles the easiest. And that's one that still happens a lot today. It's just a common thing that's always happened in relationships. Another example I see a lot of times is there might be let's just say this time it's a woman who's got what we call an orchestrator personality. An orchestrator personality is somebody that is very detail oriented, very critical thought oriented, very good with structure, very good with outlines and planning. And they're good at analyzing and seeing problems and coming up with a plan, and then a backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan. So we call that person the orchestrator. A lot of times what I'll see is a woman orchestrator who's just broken up with a man who might be what we kind of call the performer mentality. The performer mentality is somebody that's outgoing, will tell you what they're thinking. They're a natural communicator. They're good at artistic expression. They're good at articulating their feelings. They're good at making friends quickly. So we call that personality the performer. A lot of times a performer mentality and an orchestrator mentality will fall in love. And let's say this time you give an example that it's a woman orchestrator who has a strong sense of this is how it needs to go. These are the details. This is the timeline. This is the budget. This is the outline. Or they can be so driven because that personality style is driven towards getting things right, being detail oriented, being correct, not just hitting the bullseye, but hitting the bullseye and being right along the way, coming up with the best plan, the best details. And their standard can be so high that they actually make the person that they're with feel like they don't quite measure up. And a lot of times they'll fall in love with somebody that we call that performer mentality. Like I said, they're more expressive, they're more bold, they're more outgoing, they're more risk taking. But that kind of personality a lot of times isn't as detail oriented. They don't have the same kind of standard. They might do things in a less thorough way. But if you are that orchestrator mentality, your level of standard, your need to be precise in your thinking and in your outline and your approach to things might not be matched by the person that you fell in love with. You might have fallen in love with them because they're more expressive, because they're more bold, because they're more passionate, because they're more romantic, because they're willing to take a risk and sweep you off your feet. So you might be drawn to the person that has those different attributes like we're talking about. But over time, because you do have a strong standard, because you do have a high degree of excellence that's involved in how you do things, that other person might start to feel like they don't measure up to you. Like my wife is more orchestrator than I am. So she's always got a timeline. She's always got a plan. She always has an approach. She's always got like a master plan and a backup plan. And she does everything with a high degree of standard. So like a real life example of what might happen. I might tell my wife, hey, can I get you a glass of water? And she'd say, sure. And I'd say, great. And she'd say something like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you get the water out of the refrigerator instead of the tap? Thanks. Hey, can you use the ceramic mug instead of the plastic mug? I don't like how it tastes. Okay, thanks. Hey, can you get the crushed ice instead of the cubed ice? Hey, can you fill that back up before you put it back in the refrigerator? Hey, when you put it back in the refrigerator, can you put it back where I had it, because I have everything in the refrigerator laid out a certain way? So by the time I get a glass of water for the woman I love, she might have corrected me 7 times. And I'm handing her a glass of water thinking, dear God, I didn't even know I could mess up getting a glass of water in 7 different ways, but I just learned something. I know not to be offended by that. That's how my wife is wired. But sometimes when people don't understand those differences, that other person can start to feel like, wow, if I can't even get a glass of water right, maybe I'm not the man for them after all. And feeling like they're just not quite measuring up over time can really wear down on that sense of attraction, that sense of connection. And one of them will start to pull away. And it can be either one. The orchestrator mentality might pull away because they think, you know what? I need somebody that understands my standard. I need somebody that can match up with the plan that I have for my life. And as much as I care about this person and as much as I love them, they're not really kind of hitting the mark that I need. Or the other person could think, you know, I'm just tired of feeling like I don't quite measure up. Sometimes people accidentally feel like, you know, you're in love with the person I almost am. I don't know if you're in love with the person I am. So in that situation, either one of them can break up and the relationship can come to an end that doesn't actually need to come to an end. It's more like a misunderstanding than anybody actually causing the breakup. The key thing to do, if you're realizing and you're watching this video and it's starting to connect that maybe you're in love with somebody who's wired in a way that's the opposite of you, and maybe that's part of what attracted you to them in the first place, but maybe those differences are starting to create more problems than the differences create admiration. If that's happening to you, one of the things that you can do is take a deep breath and realize, look, all you have to do is make key adjustments in certain areas. You don't have to rewire who you are. You don't want to do that. It would kill the attraction anyway. So in that scenario, what needs to happen is that person who's more sensitive and not as structured, that personality that I refer to as the performer. If you're in a relationship with somebody like him, somebody like that, you can't expect them to match your level of standard, your level of what you might call excellence. So what you need to do is understand that their best is their best and admire the differences. In certain key areas, you're going to need them to measure up. Like you might have a budget. And if they're like, you know, spending like $1,700 a month on earbuds, then they have to make a key adjustment in that area and stop and at least be able to match your reasonable expectation. The key word is reasonable. So the mutual compromise there would be, okay, as long as you can do a reasonable change in behavior so that I don't have to create a new budget every week, I can appreciate that you're wired differently than me. I don't want to change who you are. That's who I fell in love with. So both sides compromise. So what I'm describing is what you call a natural breakup. It's not a toxic breakup. It's still sad, and it can still be just as serious. But just understanding that you didn't necessarily do anything wrong. So don't tell yourself you did something wrong. If this sounds like you, don't go after that other person and apologize for being who you are. You can't articulate and apologize that you didn't make key adjustments in certain key areas. But after that, apologize once, articulate it well. If this sounds like you and you feel like you broke the relationship, even though you didn't do anything that would be classically identified as wrong, toxic, or manipulating behavior, then the thing to do is reach out to the person and let them know that you can relate, that you can empathize, and you can understand how they felt. Don't apologize for being who you are as a whole. Don't start chasing after them for however long you were with them. Don't think, well, if I was with them for 2 years and I took them for granted, I'm going to chase them for 2 years. As ridiculous as that sounds, it's a common logical thought that people have. So don't do that. One of the key things you can do is articulate that you do understand their pain. So just kind of sticking with this example. Let's say that the more sensitive person, the one I identified as the performer, let's say that eventually they got tired of feeling like they don't measure up and they broke up with that calculator or that orchestrator mentality. One of the things you can do if you find yourself in that situation is reach out to the person that broke up with you. And don't reach out to them asking for one more try. They probably know that's what you want. And if your words are attached to a plea or to a request for one more try, then all the words aren't really heard. What they're hearing is, I want you back. What they're thinking is, they'll say or do anything to get me back. I don't know that I can trust their words. So take off that request. Take off the plea for one more try and just focus on empathizing and understanding their pain. So let's say I'm not really that orchestrator mentality, but I'll just kind of play that role in this scenario. Let's say somebody broke up with me because I kept expecting them to hit a certain standard. And over time, I made them feel like they weren't quite good enough. I made them feel like I'm in love with the person they almost are. One of the things I would do is reach out, and instead of saying, if you give me one more try, if you come back and give this another chance, I promise to change. One of the things to do is to reach out and say, listen, I've been taking the time since the breakup, and I'm not reaching out to ask you to give me another chance. What I'm reaching out to tell you is that I understand I've really taken this time to try to imagine what it must have been like for you. And I can remember all these times when you tried your best. I can remember all these times when you really just, you gave me your attention and you made me feel loved and you encouraged me and you built me up and you were romantic when I didn't see it coming in 1,000 little different ways. And after a while, I can recognize that I took that for granted and I started expecting you to be more like me. I started trying to hold you to a standard that I decided you need to have, and I stopped being appreciative. I stopped being grateful for the person that you are. And when I stop and imagine how that must have made you feel, I can imagine how much that must have hurt. I never meant to make you feel like you weren't loved or that you weren't cherished for the person that you are. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you that before I lost you. I'm going to take what I've learned and I'm going to be a better person for my next relationship. But that next relationship should have been you. I just didn't learn this until now. It cost me losing you to make me realize this. And I'm sorry that it did. But I'm not telling you this because I deserve another chance. I'm only telling you this because you deserve to hear it. And then let it go. Articulate their point of view. What people tend to do after a breakup is keep repeating their point of view. Let me share my pain. If you know how much pain I'm in, you'll know how much I love you. Well, they probably didn't break up with you because they didn't think you were in pain. They didn't break up with you because of how you feel. They broke up with you because of how you made them feel. So try to understand and empathize for where they're coming from. The more you can articulate and describe somebody's pain, one of the things my mentor told me that just kind of stuck. Anytime you can articulate somebody else's pain and feelings to a degree that they don't expect, to a degree that sometimes they don't even know how to express themselves or their pain, you re-attract them. Like watching this video, when I was describing some personality styles, some people were probably listening going, that's me, that's me. And in that moment during this video, you felt understood. There was a connection between us that was made if I could describe how you feel to a degree that you weren't expecting. That happens in relationships too. So try to get yourself in the mindset of the person that walked away and articulate their pain. It's also a quick way to kind of identify when a narcissist is returning. A narcissist will come back and tell you all about the pain they feel after losing you, but they don't want to talk about the pain they caused you in great detail. They don't want to take the blame. They don't want to hold accountability for it. So that's another quick way to kind of find out what you're dealing with on that area. But going back to what we're talking about now, so that's how you kind of heal one of the more complicated versions of no contact. How do I go into no contact if I caused the breakup? If you caused it, but it wasn't a more obvious and clearly identified as toxic behavior, but more of a misunderstanding of expectations in the relationship, that's how you reach out to them. Do it one time. If you do it once and you kind of restart that connection, give it time to work. If they broke up with you because they didn't feel understood, they didn't feel seen or known, then it probably took time. It's going to take time for them to move back. It's going to take time for them to kind of soak in and listen to what you're saying and understand that it's really true. If you reach out and connect and apologize and then do it again and do it again and do it again, it takes away from the power of your words in the first place. And they'll instantly believe that you're not really reaching out because you empathize and understand how they felt. You're reaching out because you're desperate to get them back, and it backfires. So it takes patience, but just articulate and express empathy for the pain that they felt. Articulate and explain why that you missed it, and apologize for listening but maybe not hearing them. But then don't keep chasing. Give it time. Now go into no contact. Now if you go into no contact, you're going into no contact with more power. But if you go into no contact and you don't reach out and identify those reasons, then a lot of times that person just isn't coming back because they left you, not because they didn't love you and not because they didn't believe in you. They left you because they didn't believe the two of you would work well together. So just give it time to work. Now, if you caused the breakup in the more traditional sense of the word, like say you were the one that cheated, you were the one that deceived, you did something that the whole universe would kind of join hands and say, yeah, you screwed it up. Then in that case, it's very similar. But just apologize one time. Just apologize one time. Don't let the guilt, don't let the self-loathing, and don't let the fear of losing them trigger you into thinking a very normal and natural thought. Yeah, but I really broke it, so I really have to pay. So even though I've been begging, chasing, and pleading for 3 weeks and they're telling me to go to hell, that's okay. I deserved it. I earned it. And part of the way I can prove to them that I'm sorry, and part of the way I can prove to them that I've changed, is I'm not going to stop chasing them. It doesn't show how much they mean to you. It shows how much you still aren't listening to what they say. It's only showing that you still care about what you want more than they're telling you what they've decided. So if you think you're actually proving how intense and how loving and how incredible your love is by refusing to give them the breakup, you're not. It's going to backfire. And it can take you from being seen as a person of strength as being seen as somebody who's actually very desperate, even weak. The word that they might even start thinking if you don't stop chasing out of guilt is pathetic. And I have clients sometimes, I'm not calling you pathetic. I'm saying if you don't stop chasing, trying to prove your regret and your sorrow by repeatedly reaching out and begging and pleading, they're not seeing the strength of your love from your pursuit. They're seeing weakness in your inability to live without them. You're not expressing remorse. You're not proving how sorry you are. You're only projecting dependence on them. Dependence, worship, and desperation, none of those things are attractive. So sometimes while you think you're proving your regret, you're actually just draining whatever's left of that attraction. So stop doing it. Do it once. Give it time, and then prove that you've changed by refusing to keep harassing them into coming back, and by actually changing your behavior. And it's going to take time, especially if you did something that's just unquestionably bad. It's going to take time. But if you can articulate it, show the changed behavior, and show the restraint and strength to stay away, believe it or not, I've seen some of the most irreparable, no hope situations get back together. So that's the best way to do it. I know these situations can be complicated, and sometimes the details really matter. So if somebody wants to set up a coaching call, I do one-on-one at dotheyloveme.com, and I'll be back again soon. Thanks.